Mr. Weinstein couldn't be stopped when he wanted what he wanted. And when he wanted it, he went to get it.
This is a case that should be about evidence. It shouldn't be about emotion. It shouldn't be about feelings, and it's not a popularity contest. And in this case, the evidence was all on our side.
Well, there was Gloria Allred and other attorneys in the trial of disgraced Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein, who both sides giving their closing arguments this week, and both focusing on the fact that Weinstein kept in touch with some of his accusers and even maintained relationships, they said, with them after the alleged sexual assaults. Let's bring in our legal panel. We have a guest in the studio, so that's what you just heard. David Bruno, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor and trial attorney. Edward Neiger, also a trial attorney. Both, thank you for joining us. David.
Hello, Eric.
Man, oh man, what do you expect on Monday?
Well, honestly, this could go either way. I mean, this is the court of law. This is not public opinion. And within the court of law, there's a presumption of innocence, and the government has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
But these stories are scorching. I mean, they're horrible. The testimony that they heard about his alleged behavior was just astounding.
Right, but you have to remember, in the indictment itself, it charges really two women as the accusers. And then the other witnesses, the victims that testified, really there to corroborate evidence. So for the two, it's an 2006 oral sex allegation and 2013 vaginal penetration. And in each case, both women continued to communicate with Harvey Weinstein. And that's the point that the defense attorneys hammered home in that closing argument, to say, hey, if this was a rape, why in the world are they continuing to communicate with the perpetrator?
But Ed, haven't we seen in cases where that sometimes can commonly happen?
It does happen on occasion. I think in this case it's going to be a hung jury. I have to agree with my colleague David over here. I think the prosecution did an excellent job in proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Harvey is a pig, that Harvey is a jerk, and that Harvey treated women like non-humans for his own personal pleasure. But the problem for the prosecution is that in this country, to be a jerk is not a crime. What they have to prove is that he committed a crime. Was he immoral? Absolutely. But in this country, it's not immoral to be a crime. That's Iran.
But what is the standard? I mean, when the prosecution says and alleges with the evidence that it was rape and there was all these horrible things, what is that line between a crime and being immoral? Sure. Or if someone's on the stand saying, this guy raped me?
Easy. It comes down to consent. The defendant is not saying that it never happened. The defendant is saying that it did happen, but it was consensual. So that's the clear line that the jury has to decide, whether or not it was consensual or not. And like I said, there's some problems in the state's case. However, this is not John Doe. This is not a general person sitting in that chair. It's Harvey Weinstein. This is a watershed moment for the Me Too movement. And there's a tremendous amount of pressure going on for this jury. And there's also those 4 additional accusers that I talked about at the top.
That's really fascinating,
that is
because
very, very prejudicial for this defendant.
They're actually not part of the charges, these 4 other women?
Right. There's a predatory sexual assault count that requires a proof of 2 or more victims of rape, generally speaking. There also has to be either a threat or physical injury. That's the big one. That's the count that could require up to life in prison, 25 to life if convicted. So if the jury comes back and says that there are multiple victims that were raped, then they may be coming back with that high count with the predatory sexual assault.
But Ed, isn't that like using previous criminal records, even though he wasn't convicted of a crime, against a defendant if you bring in other people who aren't charged?
That happens all the time. But unlike David, I am not a criminal defense lawyer. I'm a litigator. So I can't tell you exactly where the line is between being a jerk and crime is. What I can tell you is that it is definitely not a crime for 2 people of different power dynamics to have sex. If that would be a crime, then it would be almost impossible for 2 people to get together unless they were in the same income bracket. So
you also represented some of the people who worked for the Weinstein Company in the bankruptcy
I
issues?
represented many of the women who worked for the Weinstein Company in the Weinstein Company's bankruptcy. And these are very sympathetic women who were treated very badly. But were they victims of a crime? that is for the jury to decide.
Okay, what about in your cases and what you heard? Was there, the workplace situation, violations of sexual harassment statutes, and this sort of thing? And when you're dealing with this high-pressure Hollywood situation where the prosecutor says Weinstein sexually abused people, yet the defense is saying, well, they continued relationships, they wanted jobs, and they're trying to paint the alleged victims as not.
Well, there's a very big difference between a civil case where you're going for monetary damages and a criminal case where you must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Harvey Weinstein is guilty. Okay. So my job was a lot easier in that bankruptcy.
So you think hung jury?
Hung jury, absolutely.
Wow. David?
I said it could go either way. Okay. I would not be surprised if it's a not guilty. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's a guilty as well. I say that because the not guilty point, the continued communication, no physical evidence, historic allegations, no corroborating evidence at the time, but also, like I said, Me Too movement and the additional 4 victims make it so that I really don't know. And also, there's a lot of people that are going to be critical of this verdict when it comes down next week. And I'm a trial attorney. I've tried cases. I'm a former prosecutor. I'm a criminal defense attorney. To really know whether or not the jury was right or wrong, you had to be in the courtroom the whole time and to hear all the evidence, because the judge sits up there and vets the evidence based on the rules of evidence. So it's very difficult for anybody that did not see that testimony every single day to be critical of what is to come next week.
We'll see what happens. I guess if there's a hung jury, they can always try it again and prosecute it again.
Well, we also know there's an L.A. indictment,
yes,
right?
It's going off in Los Angeles after this, no matter what happens.
Agreed.
David, thank you. Edward, thank you. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a big week. Gentlemen, thank you.